Cashflow Diary podcast, episode 461.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because here's the thing. When it comes down to your ideas, you never know when you might come up with an idea that actually catches on, or more importantly, could affect more than just your own local area. Most importantly, what about just the idea of fundamentally thinking about who you are as an entrepreneur? More importantly, what can you do? And more importantly than that, how much effect can one idea, one entrepreneur have on his or her local area and or nationally? These are all things that each of us as entrepreneurs have to grapple with. We have to think about, what can our business do? Will it make a difference? More importantly, what if I just made a business about helping people make business? I mean, there's so many things that are required because at the end of the day, I believe, and I know many of you do too, that the way that we get to the end of the goal, the way that we get our own situations better is by providing jobs and definitely making sure that that income rises. What I'm talking about is, hey, let's solve the problem by creating more entrepreneurs. And that's exactly what today's guest is. That has totally based his entire platform on, if you think about it. Here's what I mean by that. I have with me today none other than Andrew Yang. You may know him because he is the founder of Venture for America and former CEO of Manhattan Prep. Previously served as President Ambassador for Global Entrepreneurship under President Barack Obama's administration. But here's the thing about that. Serving as an ambassador for global entrepreneurship, he likes the idea of more entrepreneurs. Who doesn't? And so today we're going to kind of have that conversation because at the end of the day, what we want to know is, hey, how can we be a part of the solution? So do me a favor, help me welcome Andrew Yang. Andrew, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to be here because I hear you're a little busy with something.
Yes, I'm running for President of the United States as a Democrat in 2020, which does keep me quite busy.
I can only imagine what that's like. So let's jump right into it. But one of the things that I want to do is that I want to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
Sure.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them is that occasionally as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself, saving people with my products and services, etc. And occasionally dressing up and feeling like I have a cape on anyway. Also, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. There was a time, if you think about it, with Spider-Man where he was just a kid going to school, taking some photos. And then one day something happens to him. And then he discovers he's got these superhuman abilities and he gets to choose whether to use them for good or evil. So here's the question. When it comes down to it, before Venture for America, before, Manhattan Prep, before working with President Barack Obama's administration, before even your book, Smart People Should Build Things, before all of that, what we want to know is, who is Andrew Yang?
Well, if you're asking the origin of my journey, I'd say it was growing up a skinny Asian kid in a white town in upstate New York who'd skip, and I'd skipped a grade, so I was always smaller and scrawnier than my classmates. And so if there was a superhero I related to growing up, it was definitely Peter Parker, because if you would know the character, he was sort of dweeby
Right.
and skinny. And so that was how I grew up. I always related then to the marginalized figure or the little guy or gal. And that fueled me for years and years growing up. And that's one reason why I'm running for president now, is that I'm very certain that we are automating away millions of retail jobs, truck driving jobs, call center jobs, because my friends in Silicon Valley are making great leaps ahead in artificial intelligence and the rest of it. And so who is the little guy or gal now? And it's the person who's trying to build a business or hold down a job and feed their family on the Main Street economy. And the Main Street's being blasted into smithereens by Amazon and self-driving cars and the like. And that's our new economic reality. And we need to change the underlying rules of our economy very quickly, in part to give rise to the entrepreneurship that you and I both champion and want to see more of. One of the issues is that, we entrepreneurs think like we can do it all. We can do it all.
Well, we can't. I mean, come on.
We can do amazing things. I mean, I've seen miracles, minor miracles worked by humans. But at the same time, we have to be real about the changing landscape, where many of the businesses of yesteryear that entrepreneurs would have started would have been retail jobs on their main streets, or retail businesses on their main streets. And none of those businesses make any sense anymore, because $40 billion a year is going to e-commerce and Amazon every year, and 30% of malls are going to close in the next 4 years. So starting a retail business in that landscape is probably not smart business or wise. And so you're carving away business opportunities for many, many Americans. You can see it in the numbers, where our rates of business formation are lower than they've been in decades. And so we need to change the underlying rules of our economy very, very quickly. And that's what my campaign's about. My campaign's about giving every American adult between 18 and 64 $1,000 a month, free and clear, to do whatever you want with it, to start a business, go back to school, retrain, pay your bills, get your car repaired, whatever you want. And if we build a human-centered economy, then that would be the greatest catalyst for entrepreneurship and creativity in the history of the country.
Okay, so now I've got a number of questions, because there's, first of all, I can relate to being the little guy. Until I was in like 10th grade, I was like the shortest person forever. And then all of a sudden, I guess I ate the right box of Cheerios or something. And then I don't know what happened. So, but I hear you there. But you're mentioning a couple of things that sound like, they're just juxtaposing ideas. I mean, when it comes down to it, we as humans, we want things more convenient. We want them faster. We want, to some degree, demand, dare I say, this automation. But if is automation therefore the enemy? I mean, because if it's the one that's destroying the jobs.
Well, automation should be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that the benefits of automation are being concentrated in the hands of a relatively small number of companies and individuals. And then the downsides or consequences are being spread across the largest employment sectors in the U.S. economy, where if you look at the most common jobs in the U.S., the top 5 categories are administrative and clerical work, including call centers, sales and retail jobs, food service and food prep, truck driving and transportation, and manufacturing. And all of those 5 categories, which comprise about half of American jobs, are going to shrink a ton from automation. And you can already see it in several of those sectors. So we have to start being honest about the fact that automation is going to have very clear winners and losers. And the losers, unfortunately, will be much, much more numerous than the winners. So the only way to make us all happy about this as a society is if the gains from automation are distributed much more broadly and quickly, which is the core of my campaign, is to make that happen as fast as possible.
Okay, but is $1,000 a month going to do that? Because that doesn't seem like enough or much, and it doesn't seem to like address like the person who is in one of those jobs suddenly receiving $1,000 a month. How does that turn into them becoming an entrepreneur and actually creating more jobs, or of the kind that we need?
Well, right now we're in a transition period of the greatest economic and technological shift in human history.
Hmm.
So if you get $1,000 a month right now and you're listening to this, you're not going to quit your job on that. You're going to keep doing what you've been doing, but then you're just going to have a little bit of extra money that then provides a cushion. And then if, God forbid, you do lose your job 2 years from now, then you might have more of a cushion to be able to make the next move. And then you'll still be getting the $1,000 a month. So at least there'll be something to fall back on. So the Roosevelt Institute did a study as to what would happen if everyone had $1,000 more a month. And what they found was that the economy would grow by 13% because people have more money to spend, and it would create 4.5 million new jobs and tens of thousands of new businesses around the country. Because if you think about a particular town, if everyone has $1,000 more to spend, then all of a sudden the business opportunities locally are much more abundant.
Interesting. So in any of this, though, however, where does the lack of the spirit come in? Because it takes a certain person to want to even provide jobs for other people or provide opportunities or take their ideas to market. And couldn't one argue that giving another $1,000 isn't going to suddenly create that spirit in someone?
Well, I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs around the country. You probably have too. And one thing that unifies entrepreneurs is they have a mindset of abundance and possibility and optimism, that you think that
almost to a detriment, but yes.
Almost to a detriment, that's right. And you have to look at what's happening around the country. Right now, the opposite is sweeping the nation, where a mindset of scarcity has taken hold on the vast majority of Americans because their circumstances resemble that on a daily basis. 59% of Americans cannot pay an unexpected $500 bill, and the vast majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck or month to month. So if that is your circumstance, then it's very hard to have a mindset of abundance and possibility and enterprise and thinking about starting businesses. So what you're describing is the exact challenge, which is how do you instill a mindset of abundance and optimism and possibility so that people bring their heads up and start thinking about the organizations they want to start or the businesses they want to start or the causes they want to support. And the best way to do that is just by putting purchasing power into the hands of Americans. We can reverse the mindset of scarcity and truly turn it into a mindset of abundance and create tens of thousands of entrepreneurs around the country.
Okay, so this is really a conversation about how to elevate, say, the population's psychological profile, if you will, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's what you're really saying is if we can put anybody in a position to where they're not concerned about how am I going to eat tomorrow or next week or whatever, that they would naturally want to achieve or get closer to self-actualization and actually begin to contribute in some way.
100%. That is very much the goal. It would elevate people's sensibilities and our collective mindset. One funny thing, it's not funny, it's actually very profound, but there's a study where if you sit someone down who's politically conservative and then you prime them by saying things like, you're rich, you're invulnerable, nothing bad can happen to you, and then you ask them a series of questions, they actually express many more liberal ideas. Like they become more liberal. And so right now we're skewing into this conservative and fearful and xenophobic and frankly racist mindset because people feel like they're not going to be able to pay their bills. They don't have a secure future for their children and their neighbors on disability. And so that's really the challenge, as you said, is trying to elevate people's mindset. But to elevate people's mindset, you have to elevate their economic circumstance. And the most direct and efficient way to do that is just to give everyone $1,000 a month, which would make a huge difference in the lives of tens of millions of Americans.
Yes, totally understood. So let me ask this question. When it comes down to this, let's pretend we're in this situation. This is happening. What type of entrepreneurs or what type of jobs would you say or hoping would be created from such an experiment?
Well, one example I use in the book is, let's say that you're in a town in Missouri and you're a really good baker but starting a bakery in your town doesn't make sense because there's not much of a need. But then if everyone has another $1,000 a month, then you think, hey, maybe my bakery does make sense now. And then you can employ a few people in your bakery, and worst case scenario, if bakery folds, that you'll be able to go home and survive and figure things out. So the goal of this next stage of the economy is in many respects to try and build an artisanal plus economy that's based upon what people want to do and businesses that would support jobs in their communities. Because the reality is that the Amazons and Googles and Facebooks are going to, they have more and more economic clout, and it's not realistic for people in various towns to think, I'm going to start the next Google. It's like at this point,
that
those
ship has
companies
sailed.
Yeah. So we need to get people, and this is one of the joys of this work and your work. It's about people exploring what they value and want to see in the world. And if that's a bakery because they know how to make delicious breads and cookies and cakes, then that's phenomenal. That would make people very, very happy, and it would be a boon to just about any community. And so that's the direction the economy should head. And that's what would happen if you just gave people more economic security and more power to invest in what they want to do.
Well, I'm all down for delicious bread and cake, no matter, anytime. But here's the question. You said it before, and I don't want it to be missed. You said one of the things that was necessary is that we have to change the underlying rules of the economy. What are those underlying rules, and why do they need changing?
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad that you are enjoying what you are hearing thus far. But here's one of the things that's really important. One of the most important things that you can do is get started. One of the things that I've said before, and I say again, once you get started, stay started. But more importantly, there can be lots of roadblocks to getting started. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of those roadblocks for you and make it a little bit easier. Because the thing that I don't want to stop you is thinking, do I need a local number? How about a long distance number? Or should it be 800? How on earth am I going to make that happen so that people can contact me as I'm out there building my business, making my cash flow grow? But most importantly, understanding that it doesn't have to be difficult. Many of you may know, but if you don't, there's a company out there by the name of Grasshopper. And what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Grasshopper is the entrepreneur's phone system. It works like a traditional phone system, but requires no hardware to purchase, no software to install. It's just a number that flat works. So if you are out there building that distributed workforce across many different locations, it's a way for you to still go out there and make your number be unified, simple, easy to use, something we've been using for quite some time. So again, go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story.
Well, first I want to say to anyone listening to this being like, wow, this guy is talking about some fantasy land where everyone gets $1,000 a month. That's impossible. If you look at the history, this passed the House of Representatives in 1971 under Richard Nixon. Martin Luther King was for it. 1,000 economists signed a letter saying it'd be great for the economy and society. And it stalled in the Senate because Democrats wanted a higher income threshold. So this came within a hair's breadth of being national law. It was almost passed after Social Security and Medicare in the 60s, and they were looking around being like, what else can we do? How about we just guarantee everyone a certain amount of money? And so it was right there. We even ran large-scale trials around the country and gave people money just to see what would happen. I mean, imagine a functional government that had its act together enough to do that, whereas now we have this miserable, reality star as a president. Anyway, so anyone who's listening to this thinking like, oh, this is too good to be true, we have to remember our history where this is baked into our country's DNA. And there's a state in the country that has had a universal basic income for 36 years. Everyone in that state that gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year right now, free and clear, no questions asked. And that state is Alaska, which passed a petroleum dividend under a Republican governor and is a deep red state. And the petroleum dividend is wildly popular. It has created thousands of jobs. It has increased or improved children's nutrition, lowered inequality. So this is all possible and real. And if enough people get behind my campaign, we can make it real. We are the owners and shareholders of this society, and we can vote ourselves a dividend, which is what I'm calling this plan. This is the freedom dividend.
I like that. I like dividends for sure, but I like exactly where you're going with that. Now, let me ask this question though. How does the underlying rules of the economy actually become affected by this? Or more importantly, what rules or is it that you see that need to change?
Well, right now, the general rule is that we must work to survive in a subsistence model. In other words, I'm going to give you enough money generally just to get by. And if you don't show up, you don't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules are stacked in favor of large corporations and institutions and against individuals more and more. And if you look at it, the contract between employer and employee has completely disintegrated, where 94% of the new jobs created between 2005 and 2015 were gig economy or temp contractor jobs that did not have healthcare benefits and other benefits. And that's being pitched as be your own boss, be flexible, blah, blah, blah. But it's really just companies trying to save money. So those are the rules of the economy as they currently exist, and they are terrible for most Americans.
Okay. But because it's funny, as you were talking, I was like, I was actually thinking about the sharing economy and its ability to at least begin to facilitate transactions or these peer-to-peer networks or various ideas that have come to the marketplace that enable, one or, two people to get together and actually do a transaction and, the enterprising few to go out there and grow it big. It doesn't, is it that you would like to see more of that or just less bigger business? Because either way it goes, we're still going to have the healthcare issue.
Well, one of my core elements as president is going to be to provide national health care, Medicare for all. And the way we do that is by lowering the eligibility age over time. Because right now, healthcare is, again, a complete hindrance to entrepreneurs where you have to pay through the ear for healthcare. And it's right now still the number one cause of bankruptcy in the U.S. It's a massive, I know personally many, many people who are still in their jobs just for the healthcare. Like they would leave tomorrow if the healthcare went with them.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying is like that, I think the sharing economy has a great place and fills kind of this need void, if you will, that gives people at least the hope of, hey, well, maybe I can do something here, to be able to bring in a little, let's call it $1,000 on a monthly basis or do something additional or begin to create new jobs. I mean, I've seen, firsthand, the gig economy creates so many smaller entrepreneurs and services that can be had as well. Wouldn't you say that kind of that process has already begun?
Well, it's certainly begun, and there are a lot of good things out of lowering the friction between two people transacting
mm-hmm.
and being able to take advantage of people's skills. But if you look at the numbers, it is very often the case that people are really forced to hustle to eke out enough money to feed themselves, and it's making it harder and harder for people to raise families, that's for sure. Where a lot of the infrastructure that surrounds families used to be provided by employers, and it's very hard to get that in the sharing economy.
Well, yeah, that's very true. Now, I did have another question. Let's go back to the book for a second. Because I love the title, but it makes me wonder, smart people should build things. But more importantly, how to restore our culture of achievement, build a path for entrepreneurs, and create new jobs in America. Let's talk about the culture of achievement part. You're saying restore it. I mean, from my vantage point, and again, it's limited comparatively speaking, but I'm looking at it and thinking I see, and maybe I'm just biased because of the networks that I'm in. It feels like everyone's out there trying to get something done, and coming up with the ideas, left and right. I mean, we've got shows like Shark Tank now, on the U.S. television, Dragon's Den, if you're familiar with the other one, but we've got a lot of this. And right now being an entrepreneur is kind of like the cool thing to do, or at least say you're doing. So what do you mean by restore?
By the numbers, if you graduate from certain universities, the odds are highest that you'll head to law school, becoming an investment banker, management consultant, head to tech firms, head to academia, or become a doctor. And those 6 things will also guide you to a handful of cities: New York, San Francisco, Boston, DC, maybe Seattle, maybe Austin nowadays. And so we have a lot of smart people who are not becoming entrepreneurs, that's for sure. Like, what they're becoming is highly paid professionals who then extract value from mature organizations or very large systems. And that's the norm for people who graduate from many, many schools. That's the landscape I saw when I was running my company, Manhattan Prep. I was helping college graduates get into business school. And so I started Venture for America to help address that, but now have realized that the problems are much, much bigger. And so the culture of achievement that I was looking to change was that we need to get our bright young people trying to solve meaningful problems and not just doing financial spreadsheets or PowerPoint decks for big companies.
Got it. And so again, it's back to more smaller independent businesses, or at least applying those ideas. Couldn't you say though that we kind of created our own monster, if you will, simply by when we create the situation such that it's the path of least resistance is to be, as you said, extract value from the large, established, mature corporations?
Yeah, that is the path of least resistance. And that's one of the things we've lost. I mean, the spirit of enterprise and of character and of building things and of risk has really slipped away in much of this country, where, again, the rates of business formation are at record lows, and the people with the highest levels of education are often not taking huge risks with their careers. And I know this because I've been around a lot of them. The people that are being forced to take risks are people that are getting marginalized economically, where they're getting pushed into the gig economy and then being forced to hustle and scramble to make a living. And then, there are pluses and minuses to that arrangement, but I would suggest that the minuses get more and more serious when you do try and do something like start a family. And as the father of 2 young children, like, I understand this myself. So we do need to rewrite the code. We need to rewrite the rules of the game, because the rules are getting darker and darker and meaner for many, many people, where the odds of your children doing better than you did back in the 40s and 50s was 92%. And that's the American dream. You have kids that are going to do better. That percentage was down to 50% by the 1990s, and now it's less than 50%. So at this point, Americans are waking up to the reality that our kids are going to have a much tougher time than we did. And that's wrong. I mean, we can fix that, but we need to come together and make very, very big changes.
So, but wouldn't that be due in part the tougher time? I 100% agree. My oldest is actually in college, and I'm just like, oh boy. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
That's really what goes through my head a lot. But wouldn't you say that this is more akin and due to things like you were mentioning earlier, some of the advancements in technology? I mean, for all intents and purposes, as an entrepreneur, the amount of workforce, let's just take that little piece, the amount of eligible workforce, my pool of people that I can choose from to be able to facilitate any sort of job that I need. Well, technology enables me to expand that pool to the entire world. And therefore the landscape has become way more competitive in that way. And, one could argue that because we've the United States, has had such an advantage for a long time. Now there's there's an influx of very inexpensive labor that's really, really accessible through technology more than anything. And
yeah, someone in Romania or another part of the world could say, "Hey, I'm a college grad. I'll do your work for $8 an hour." And then for your kid to be like, "Oh, I can't price myself at $8 an hour. I owe $38K in school loans." I mean, like the playing field is far from level.
well, and I guess where I was going with that is, I'm how do we address that? Or is that why you're saying we should build things for export? I'm trying to understand the build part is actually what's going on.
Well, here's what's happening. That there are a handful of companies really in our country that are generating unprecedented levels of value. Like Jeff Bezos is on his way to becoming the world's first trillionaire. And just think about what that means. Like a human could be
Right.
worth $1,000 billion. And those are the new rules of the game where the benefits accrue to a smaller and smaller number of people. And so as a society, we have to come together and go to Jeff and the gang and say, hey, you're fantastically wealthy, great. But the fact is, you're benefiting from the existence of our entire society. Like, we have fueled your success. And so we need to start trying to build a new human-centered economy that will help sustain people regardless of whether they happen to, be a computer science major from like a particular school. Because it's not like we can all become coders, and eventually those jobs start getting automated away anyway. So we need to start valuing people intrinsically and say, look, let's build a different kind of economy as fast as we can. Because if we chase GDP and profits and the stock market, we're going to find that there's a home for fewer and fewer of us, like your children, my children. We've been running on like a 60s or 70s era paradigm, and we certainly have a 60s era government, and it's slipping away from us very, very fast.
Okay. But in that situation though, don't we de-incentivize innovation? Aren't we de-incentivizing the entrepreneurs to even create? Don't we lose access to our Bezoses of the future simply because they're like, I don't want to do it?
Well, my plan to pay for it is to implement a value-added tax at half the European level. So if you were to go to Jeff Bezos and say, hey, Jeff, instead of being worth $1,000 billion, let's say theoretically you're going to be worth 900 billion. Are you going to tell me that Jeff's like, oh, then none of this was worth it? Like, if I could go back in time, I would never have been anything. I mean, the entrepreneurs I know are driven by, as you said, like deep human impulses. If they happen to be wildly successful, and some of that goes back to their fellow men and women and Americans, they'd have to be. It's just not the case that like a slight value-added tax is going to discourage innovation. If anything, it's a better long-term home for innovation, because innovation starts to break down when people get angry, which is where we're heading right now.
Got it. I understand. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, is there any particular, I guess, sector or type of job that you would like to see affected first?
When you say affected, how do you mean?
Well, you mentioned earlier that when automation there was, I think it was 6 different classes of occupations that were being targeted. Are you saying we need those to come back? Are you saying that those need to be transformed? And if so, in what way and how?
Well, it's almost impossible to preserve many of these jobs. Where if you look at
Right.
shopping malls, again,
Right.
30% are going to close. And are you really going to pass a law saying like all malls, like all of us to go to the mall again?
No.
So the jobs are going to disappear. And in terms of the rate, I think it's bad for most anyone when they lose their job, even if in the big picture that's going to happen. As a society, what I'm for is putting many, many more resources in place so that if you lose your job, it's not an existential level crisis. It's still going to stink, but you're going to be able to go home, pet your dog, kiss your wife or husband, and say, well, let's figure out the next thing. But paying lip service to that and putting real money behind it are very different things. And I'm a very practical guy. I want us to put real money behind it for everybody.
And I hear you, but here's the thing that at least I've seen, and I know is true for so many. It is the losing of that job. It is the potential back against the wall thing that finally wakes up that spirit that's inside that causes the human to, finally let and take the risks, because it's like, you know what? That's it. I quit. I'm going to finally do what I've been thinking.
They'll still get that. They'll still get that awakening. They'll just have a little more money to work with.
Interesting thought. Because initially in my head goes, it removes it delays it, or it slows it down in some way, shape, or form. Because
don't worry about it, man. I've got many of friends who had money to fall back on. They lose their jobs and they come back fired up. And the fact that they had some money just meant they took a vacation and then came back fired up. But people get fired up even if they're not about to go to zero or negatives. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm aware. I just know that for myself, it took things like that to actually get us into gear and to get us focused. And there's something to be said for, I think the risk of, or at least the potential, knowing that potential is there, that, hey, there is no safety net. It's up to me. I believe it does a certain something.
I mean, my friend Damon John called it the power of broke.
Right.
But I will say that broke becomes relative, where, for most Americans, if all they have is their like $1,000 a month to fall back on, they're going to be like, I'm broke.
Agreed. Very relative number for sure. Cause that's back to why I was thinking, I don't think $1,000 is enough, but yeah, I hear you where you're coming from there. So there's a number of people who have been listening this far and, probably want to find out more about, what you got going on, keep tabs on you, and, what's going to be the best way for them to find out more or track you down and see what's going on?
Sure thing. So my website is yang2020.com. Again, I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020 to bring about the freedom dividend, that every American adult gets $1,000 a month, and build a new kind of economy that's human-centered. It's necessary to evolve to the next stage of capitalism because technology is going to automate away many of our livelihoods very, very fast. So please do come join the campaign. We have a campaign called One for Humanity, where you just donate $1 just to show that, yes, you too want to see a new kind of economy. But we're building a movement. It's awesome. I was just in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago. I have a new book that just came out called The War on Normal People: The Truth About America's Disappearing Jobs and Why Universal Basic Income is Our Future. And it makes the case for the fact that a universal basic income is inevitable for our society. And the sooner we wake up to that and make it a reality, because we are the owners of the society, so we can make it a reality whenever we decide to, the better off we'll all be. So please do come to the website, yang2020.com, or just Google my name, Andrew Yang, and let's make this new economy real together.
Let me be the first to say that I appreciate you, having the one, caring, more importantly, being willing to share, and most importantly, coming up with something to do about it. I mean, there's a number of people that, and we all know them, who can complain, who can point fingers, who can say, this is broken and that's wrong. But it's a rare individual who wants to not just change it, but actually is willing to put, time, effort, energy, money, and resources behind it. And you are clearly one of those, and we definitely appreciate that. So let me be one of the first to say thank you for taking the time to.
Oh, thank you. That's such a beautiful sentiment. And I am an entrepreneur. Like, entrepreneurs solve problems. You know it better than most. So, if you see this problem, then we have to try and solve it. But thank you.
You quite welcome. And thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
No, my pleasure. It's great to be here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. You've got multiple books to choose from on this particular one. You've got the War on Normal People, and smart people should build things. And you know that you have an entrepreneur inside of you. Here's the thing. Because it's inside, it's time for you to let it on the outside, because like I know, entrepreneurs are the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.